This episode is brought to you by Ursa Minor Outfitters. Folks, I'm absolutely in love with my loon mug. It's handmade, it's an absolute piece of art. Whether it's at the office or at the house, people keep asking to check it out. If you're not a loon fan, they also have other beautiful mugs for wildlife fans of moose, bears, and eagles. They specialize in products highlighting the outdoors and local pride through quality design by local artists. They've even started expanding into items beyond mugs, like apparel, dog accessories, and soon candles and more. They also try to partner and highlight other small businesses, and in some cases, forego profits in lieu of charitable giving to help their community, such as the dog rescue. So check them out, UrsaMinorOutfitters.com, and enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for our four-legged hiking partners, they also have a portable silicone dog bowl and also a sweet over-the-collar dog bandana. Go check them out, UrsaMinorOutfitters.com, and don't forget to enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. Welcome, everyone, to the latest episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I'm your host, Ivan, and I'm excited to share this new season of the podcast with you. With both fall and winter arriving in the Pacific Northwest, it's time to store the mobile recording studio. This season, we'll be switching things up and interviewing some of my favorite hikers that I follow on Instagram virtually. We're following a similar format to season 1, where the first part of the episode focuses on the guest and their hiking adventures, and we're still going to end each episode with a speed round of this or that questions, all related to hiking. We have a special episode today as we have two guests on the podcast, brothers Hayden and Harrison. You can follow them on Instagram at Backpacking Brothers. It was a fun time talking to both of them on this episode. We learn about their memorable hiking adventures across the West Coast and Southwest, which animals got their hearts pumping while enjoying the outdoors, and their amazing road trip up to Yellowstone and Glacier National Parks. Without further ado, let's jump into this episode with our guests, Hayden and Harrison. Welcome, everyone, to the Hikes and Mikes podcast. We got a really great episode today. This is going to be the first time we have more than one guest on the episode. We have the Backpacking Brothers, Hayden and Harrison, on the podcast today. They're going to be sharing their experiences throughout the country and even abroad. Thank you, Harrison and Hayden, for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate you guys joining us. One of the first questions that we kind of start off with is just getting to know how each of you started hiking and how long you've been hiking for.
First, thank you so much for having us. We were stoked to jump on the podcast with you. It's pretty cool. I feel like there's not many podcasts that I know about there that are about hiking, which obviously we love. So we're stoked to be here. But yeah, as far as for us, we grew up hiking and camping and stuff with our folks. They would get us out and kind of did it all through high school and a little bit in college. And then I moved to LA and Harrison moved to Long Beach. And then we really started, I think, even jumping more in. And we've been talking forever about we want to go to this park or that park. And then we finally started doing it. And then when 2020 hit, we just kind of went all out and then never stopped, never slowed back down. We used to do a hike here, a hike there, maybe some local hikes and, go to a national park here or there. But then, like I said, the pandemic hit and we just went and haven't stopped since and don't really plan on stopping. So,
yeah, like Hayden said, we grew up under the same roof. He's my older brother. And our parents took us camping, hiking, rafting when we were kids, mostly around the mid-Atlantic, Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia. So we've always kind of been oriented towards the outdoors and hiking and those kinds of activities. And like he was saying, over time, as we got older, especially once I started getting into my 20s, it developed into a passion. You get that itch, you get the bug, and it never really goes away. And living abroad definitely catalyzed that for me as well.
One of your great posts that you guys threw up on your Instagram feed was an OG picture of you guys in your hiking gear with a walking stick. How did you guys kind of maintain the passion of hiking throughout those years, from being a kid through your teenage years, through college, and then through the pandemic?
As a kid, we always had really supportive parents, always encouraging us to get outside, to do physical activities and things like that. So growing up, it was a normal part of life for us. We're very fortunate in that regards. For me, hiking became a pastime I would do with my buddies throughout high school and college. And yeah, like Hayden said, the train has just continued to barrel.
Is that where you guys kind of started the channel, was during the pandemic of doing hikes together?
Yeah, we did. That's when we started the Backpacking Brothers. Basically, we were like, oh, let's put a space together where we can just share pictures of hikes we do together or separately. We're originally just to like look back on, Then I also started really getting into more like, nature photography, and that's becoming a hobby. But yeah, like you said, 2020, we just kind of took off, and then, it's an addiction. You get out there and it's like, you just can't wait to get back out there. So
Definitely. And you guys have hit up some amazing national parks over the last couple of years. And I'm really excited to kind of talk to you about some of those that you've recently hit up. But Harrison, you kind of mentioned it already. You had an amazing opportunity to join the Peace Corps, and you served in Tanzania while you were there. But you also did some hiking in Africa. Can you kind of share about your experience in the Peace Corps and how it was hiking in Africa?
Like you said, I served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Tanzania from 2015 to 17. And then I spent a little time in Uganda and Thailand after that in 2018 before coming back stateside. It was an incredible experience. I worked as an education volunteer in Tanzania, and I was living in a pretty small remote village right on the outskirts of a national rainforest. It was high up in the Pari Mountains of Kilimanjaro region, which is in northeastern Tanzania. Gosh, so much to unpack from that experience. I would say in terms of my day-to-day experience, I was pretty exposed to the elements, and I didn't have a whole lot of modern amenities or resources, but it was an absolute adventure and challenge in every sense of the word. And I made some lasting friendships over there. As a cross-cultural experience, it's pretty unrivaled. With respect to hiking, there's tremendous variety in terms of terrain and ecosystems across the continent. And the hiking experience really, really varies country by country, landscape by landscape. In Tanzania, for instance, you've got different types of protected areas. You've got national parks and forests, nature reserves, game reserves, etc. And some of these PAs, they get a fair amount of ecotourists, while others are quite remote and not very frequently visited by foreigners or tourists. Some of these national parks, like Table Mountain in South Africa or Kilimanjaro is a pretty popular one in Tanzania. They have well-established trails that are quite similar to things you would find in U.S. national parks. And then there's other smaller parks that really don't get any foot traffic outside of the locals that live in and around these protected areas. And the trail systems in these parks are much more rugged, less maintained, and they just get kind of wear and tear from the wildlife, from the locals, like I said, that live in those areas. And then, of course, there's a lot of parks in protected areas, especially in East Africa, that they're primarily used obviously for conservation purposes, but then also for photography, game drives, safaris. And in those parks, it can be kind of dangerous to get out of the vehicle and explore on foot in certain areas because of the wildlife.
Yeah, I can imagine. I've seen some of the videos where it's either a cheetah or something comes right up onto the Jeep, and you just kind of have to sit still until they go. Did you ever come across any of those predators while you were hiking or out and about?
Yeah, so I had the good fortune of being able to do a handful of safaris in some of the big national parks in Tanzania, like the Serengeti or Ngorongoro Crater. Those are two parks that most people are familiar with around the world. And the biodiversity and the wildlife in some of these parks is off the charts. I had close encounters in vehicles with lions, giraffes, elephants, all kinds of different animals. And then the village that I lived in, it overlooked a smaller national park called Mkomazi. And during the dry season, we would get a lot of wildlife that would come up into the mountains, up into the forest in search of water. That was a pretty wild experience, just walking on a path and coming across baboons or elephants. At one point in time, we had a leopard towards the end of my service that came up from the near park and was picking off people's livestock. Unfortunately, it didn't end well for the leopard, but it was pretty wild.
Oh, man. So Hayden, during that time, were you able to go visit Harrison while he was stationed there with the Peace Corps?
No, honestly, unfortunately, I never was able to get over there during that time frame. But it's funny because we have since been talking. Like, one of the things we both really want to do is he wants to obviously go back. I've never been, and we both want to go back and do Kilimanjaro as well. So I'd love to get over there. But yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't swing it at the time. So,
but that's an upcoming goal that you guys have, is to go back and do Kilimanjaro.
It is on the agenda for sure.
Right on. Now, here on the States, one thing that I really enjoy about your guys' content, and they don't really get that much love on social media, but you guys have showcased some really amazing state parks in your guys' area there in SoCal and up in the Sierras. They normally don't get the same attention that national parks do, but some of them that you've showcased are really spectacular, but without the crowds. Is there one state park that stands out for each of you that has kind of taken your breath away when you guys have hiked around there?
I've got a special place in my heart for Anza Borrego Desert State Park. I'm going to throw in Mojave Desert Preserve as well. I get a lot of flack from my brother and my friends about that one, but I love the Mojave. But Anza Borrego's, it's incredible. The vistas that you can find in that park of the Badlands, the different kinds of slot canyons. I mean, it's got everything you would want out of a desert park compact into a smaller state park that, you know, like you were saying, doesn't get the same number of visitors and tourists as some of the larger national parks. And these were places that, you know, these state parks, we flocked to them during the pandemic precisely to avoid the crowds.
I would say Big Pines Lake. That's up in the Sierras, kind of to the right of Yosemite and Kings Canyon and stuff. The lakes there are absolutely incredible. The colors, it looked like the pictures I'd seen of lakes in like Banff National Park. And it's just right there. So that was one of my favorite state parks for sure. And crowds were not bad there either. And then also we go to Utah a lot as well. And Dead Horse State Park, you know, that was incredible. We did some hiking there, and even just the main horseshoe, you can just drive right up and see it, but it looks like something out of a national park for sure. So those two definitely be my favorite. And yes, the Mojave, not my favorite. We do always give my brother a hard time because a lot of times too we'll pass through the Mojave on the way to Utah, and every time we pass through he's like, the Mojave, and myself and some of our other friends are like, I don't see it, not seeing it, but you know, to each their own.
Now, Hayden, is that because there's been some bad experiences in the Mojave for you that kind of soured your taste?
Well, I would say there's only one hike in the Mojave that I really, really dig. It was the Kelso Dunes. That's a pretty cool hike, the sand dunes. But other than that, I just found some of the other hikes a little underwhelming. Also, that being said, we did one time, we were hiking in Death Valley and we were coming back and traffic was a nightmare and it rerouted us through the Mojave, and we spent hours driving in pitch black through the Mojave, and it felt like we were never gonna get back. So that was probably also has to do with my disdain for the Mojave Desert.
Man. Switching gears to national parks, there's one in particular that kind of pops up on your feed pretty regularly on Instagram, and that's Zion National Park, especially Angel's Landing. Can each of you kind of share some of the experience that you've had at Zion that kind of keeps bringing you back to visit?
Sure, yeah. I think, and Harrison, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't Zion the first national park that we went to together? Like, I mean, once we were out in California, not including being kids.
Once we were out in California?
Yeah, I thought so. I mean, Zion, it was one that before I even really was, doing research and stuff on the parks, I just always heard about Zion and always wanted to go. And I was like, whoa, it's only 6 hours from LA. Like, let's just go. And yeah, so part of it too is just we can get up there in 6 hours, which is nice. And love the Angel's Landing hike. It's, not incredibly difficult, but it's a nice, nice burner. And one of my favorite things personally is the whole way up, you just have incredible views the entire time. And then when you get to the top of Angel's Landing, it's just, to me, there's just nothing like it. That view off the top, it just brings me back year after year. I kind of made it a annual thing to go in November. I found November, it's not as crowded as summers and stuff. And all the places we've been, for me, that's still my favorite view is the top of Angel's Landing. And one of the times we were there, got to the top, we were the first people up there, and a giant condor flew down and landed right on this rock in front of us. And it was pretty awesome to get that close. I think the trick is just to get up there before everyone else. The most time I've had up there by myself was we had about like 25 minutes, and then crowds started coming up. But for me, yeah, Zion is just it's an awesome park. I love the whole experience. There's a phenomenal elk burger, the best elk burger I've ever had, at the bottom there at the Zion Brew Pub. So big Zion fan. But Bups, you can talk about yours.
Hayden pretty much summed it up, especially like he was saying, going in November, kind of towards the end of fall, right before winter gets into full swing. I mean, the whole park is just ablaze with the fall colors. You feel like you're walking and hiking through a painting. Pretty breathtaking. And Angel's Landing, that's got to be one of the most unique hikes I've ever done personally. I didn't quite realize what it entailed until I got to the final leg of the hike the first time, and I looked up. I was like, oh wow, that's where we're we're going. I didn't even realize that originally. I don't know what my misperception was, but it was funny. The first time I did the Angels Landing hike, this was not too long after I'd gotten back from Peace Corps, and I had a pair of Nike shoes. They weren't even trail shoes or hiking boots. It was just a pair of regular Nike trainers that had the same amount of grip as basically a pair of bowling shoes. I'd worn them abroad for 3 years. They were ground down to nubs on the bottom, and it wasn't like there was ice or snow or anything, but going up that final leg, I was definitely clutching onto the chains pretty tightly and making sure to mind my step every way, because I did not want to be at that section of the hike.
Oh, man. And I don't know if you guys have seen it lately, but all those winter storms that came through California and through the Southwest got some decent snow on Angel's Landing. So a lot of people are finally coming out with that content. Out of all the times that you guys have done it, has there been snow on the path and on the trail leading up to the top?
No, not really. It's gotten pretty cold and windy, extremely windy a couple times up there, but we haven't hit it yet with snow. I think it'd be cool. Like, we talked, because we've done Canyonlands. We'd hike there in snow and then not in snow. And it was such a different experience hiking that same trail in the snow that, I think it'd be really cool to hike Angel's Landing in the snow. It would definitely, there's some parts that might feel a little sketchier for sure by the chains, but yeah, we haven't done it yet in the snow.
And one thing that I've noticed is, there's sections where there's chains, but the room that you have from the chains to the edge isn't that much. So out of all the times that you guys have done it, what would you say is like the proper etiquette? Like, who gets the right of way of the chain? Is it the person coming down or is it the person going up?
I'd say the person, I don't know, it really depends. They're section by section. Honestly, I try to give way to the person that looks like they have the most concern in their eyes.
Oh, that's a good way. Yeah.
Yeah, right. It's a tough one, because I feel like I try to, if people are coming up, I'll try to like stand to the side to let them come up, but then obviously at some point, like, because it can get crowded on there. And I think the nice thing though is like we've always gotten up there so early that like we really haven't dealt with the crowds. But I do remember coming down one year and it's like, holy cow, so many people are coming up. And at some point you just kind of have to be like, okay, it's like now red light for everyone coming up, let some people come down. And then, and that's kind of how it was too on Half Dome. I feel like it was like, okay, let some people come down, then a group goes up, some people come down, group goes up, but
Okay. I haven't done it yet, but when I was in Hawaii, I did Stairway to Heaven, and similar concept where like the stairs really only fit one person at a time. So when somebody was coming down, like somebody had to go off the stairs. So it was always a little bit of a standoff, like who's going to do it. For the most part, I think if you're coming down a steep edge, the person that was going up would at least stick a leg over the stairs and at least let you get through. With the new lottery rule that they have in place there at Zion, what tips would you guys have for folks that do want to visit and do Angel's Landing but avoid the crowds?
Yeah, I would say number one tip is obviously if you can try to get on the lottery and not in peak season towards the end of fall or even winter or early spring. But that, and then if you can get on that earliest one, I think it's like the 7 a.m. one, then you can get on that first bus and get up there pretty much before anyone else does and get a little time to yourself. So that would be the number one tip I would say. And the other thing is, if you don't win the lottery, I would don't even waste your time going up there, because unlike at Half Dome, they kind of will let you, if you don't have a lottery, but someone comes up that doesn't want to use or has an extra lottery ticket, Half Dome, their rangers are like, okay, yeah, you can take their lottery ticket. But at Zion, they were not letting people do that. And there was people being like, oh no, like I won 4 passes and I'm only using 2 of them. Can this person not use it? And the ranger was like, no. So either that or decide, because it was really interesting, because it was like, he was like, well, how would you have known if this guy wasn't actually in our group? And the ranger's like, well, you told us. And they're like, well, yeah, but like, so if we hadn't have told you, we just had said from the get-go, this guy's in our group. So that would be the other tip. If you do it without a lottery ticket, just talk to the people on the trail before you get to the ranger, because the ranger was, at least that day, this past November, he was not letting people come up with other people's lottery tickets.
Oh, that's good to know. And Harrison, the few times that you've done it after that first experience with the Nike shoes, what kind of, I guess, hiking boots or shoes would you recommend for this type of hike?
Yeah, that's an easy question for me. I am through and through to the bone a Hoka man. So my brother and I both have the Hoka Speed Goat 5s, and I swear by those. I mean, they're the only trail shoe I've ever had that I've never had to break in. I got them about a week before we did Mount Whitney, and I had other problems going up Whitney, but no problems with my feet. I mean, no blisters, pure comfort, good speed and movement. So,
and that's without a break-in period, huh?
Yeah, I wore them before Mount Whitney. I wore them once doing just a short 3-mile hike back behind my house where I live in Monterey. And other than that, that was it.
And are those more like trail runners, or is that more of a regular hiking boot?
It's a trail runner. They also make a Speed Goat boot, which I also have. And I'd say the same thing. In terms of breaking in the boots, they're equally as comfortable, but because they come up higher around the ankle, you might want to wear them around on some lighter hikes or nature trails before you go out and do something too intense. I'd say the same applies mostly.
Yeah, I'll definitely pull those up and I'll add them to the episode notes so people can check them out, because I'm always looking for new shoes. I feel like mine, they only last a season or two and then I got to switch them out. So I'll be definitely checking out those. Now, sticking with California, your Instagram feed is full of beautiful places in the Sierra Nevadas. For each of you, is there a specific region in the Sierras that you enjoy hiking the most in?
I mean, for me personally, it's the easy choice, but it's got to be Yosemite. I did a 5-day backpacking trip there through the backcountry that was just incredible with one of my buddies and his wife, and we didn't see anyone for 4 of the 5 days. And then, since then I've gone back numerous times, and we did Half Dome in October, which was just probably one of the most unique hikes I've ever done. I'm going back Memorial Day weekend this year. I just got my campsite locked down, so I'm excited to go back. But there's just, when you come, through the tunnel and then you see Half Dome and El Capitan and everything right there, it's stunning. So for me, that's been my favorite. And then, and I would also say, obviously, we did Mount Whitney and we did it in one day. And that was just an incredible sense of accomplishment. So I know it's the easy choice, but I'll go Yosemite.
I'm going to have to say Kings Canyon. For me, it's perfect snapshot of everything you want in the Sierra Nevada mountains. I didn't spend a whole lot of time there. I spent about a day and a half when I went. It's everything you want. I mean, very, very few people out on the trails, amazing overlooks of the mountains. You feel like you're deep back in the backcountry, even when you're on some of the popular trails, rivers, waterfalls, fresh air, pristine California.
And that's not as popular as Yosemite, right? The crowds aren't as bad there in Kings Canyon?
Not nearly as popular.
I can't remember. Someone told us, remember when we were up there, they were like, oh yeah, they said something like, yeah, Kings Canyon, it's you get the views of Yosemite without the crowds.
That's right.
Oh, okay. That's a good way of putting it. Both of you kind of mentioned Mount Whitney, and I kind of want to know a little bit more about that experience of hiking it in one day. Like, how early did you guys start, and how was that experience?
I can go ahead with my experience. Our experiences overlapped at times, but I'll tell you straight off the bat, I did everything wrong. Well, first of all, the week leading up to it, I was really sick, just an upper respiratory illness, and I'd finally gotten over my symptoms about 24 hours before we were going to do the hike. So I drove straight from Monterey at sea level to Lone Pine, the town right at the portal of Whitney. Got there, and we were with a number of our buddies. We'd all gotten hotel rooms down below for the evening. We stayed up really late. We're big martial arts fans. We were watching a UFC event. We stayed up really late to watch that event in its entirety. Ended up only getting a few hours of sleep. We were up, I think, at like 3 a.m. out on the trail. I felt good the first 7 to 8 miles. And then once we hit, I think it was around 13,000 feet, I felt like I got stuck in the mud. I mean, altitude sickness hit me over the head like a ton of bricks. I was dizzy. I felt like I was drunk. My cold symptoms were starting to make a comeback. And it was just a rough push to the top. I think it was like the last few miles. And then coming down on one of the sections of switchbacks, I injured my knee. And at the time I was concerned. I thought maybe I had popped MCL or something. I was in a lot of pain, still dealing with the altitude sickness, and I had a migraine and ended up having to basically limp the last 8 miles down. Luckily, Hayden didn't leave me in the dust. He stayed with me the whole way back. At times, he was giving me helping me out to cross certain ravines or creeks or streams that were giving me trouble. But I was in a lot of pain. So luckily made a full recovery. Wasn't anything seriously torn, just really bad inflammation.
But you made it to the top, made it back down. Wow, that's impressive. Props to you, Harrison. For your experience, Hayden, doing Mount Whitney, how was it for you?
Like he said, we really probably shouldn't have stayed up as late as we did because we only got a couple hours of sleep. But then we got up and got going, and I loved the hike going up. We were just cruising. I mean, we were making really good time, and we'd hiked at 13,000 feet elevation before, a little over it. At Great Basin National Park, we did Wheeler Peak there, and we'd hiked at higher elevations, and it never really affected us. But once we got over 13,000, the altitude sickness kicked in, and very dizzy and nauseous. We were coming around this one edge on like the last couple miles, and I think Harrison is like, you need to stay further to the right because you're stepping too close to the edge. But the dizziness, I was like, So we kind of struggled to get up to the last couple miles, which was a shame because like we were making really good time. But yeah, we got up there, and it was still that just sense of accomplishment of getting up there. And we really wanted to, just do it in one day. And then we came down, and he hurt his knee. I felt really bad because we just took forever to get down. But we got down and we were sitting there. There's actually at the base, like of the trailhead, there's this little shack that they make a bunch of actually really good food. And we got burgers there, and they were delicious. And we were sitting there. I think I said something to Harrison like, yeah, man, we did it. Like, this is one we're going to remember. And he was like, yeah, we'll see in a couple of weeks if it's one I want to remember.
Is it on your list for future hikes, maybe down the road for either of you to tackle it again?
I would do it again. I would like to acclimatize and maybe camp at a higher elevation before I do it, just to get more used to what it entails. I mean, the wild thing too is that both Hayden and I grew up competitively downhill ski racing. So we've been at high elevations in a number of mountain ranges around the world before. And I don't think either of us experienced altitude sickness, but boy, did it hit us on Whitney.
Switching gears to some other great trips that you guys have done. This last May, you did a pretty epic trip, not just to Yellowstone, but you also were able to visit Glacier National Park. How was that trip for each of you, and what are some of the moments that stand out for each of you during that trip?
Oh man, yeah, that was a trip, long time coming. We had said we wanted to go to Yellowstone for so long, and Glacier as well. And personally, for me, it is that was my favorite trip I've ever done. Getting to Yellowstone, it really was. It lived up and surpassed the hype. It was a feeling that I can't quite put into words because it was so surreal. Like getting there and getting out. We kind of skipped where all the crowds were, and we went out and we did a hike that went through the Lamar Valley, and there was no one else out there, and we're hiking through Lamar Valley, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. And it really felt like, we're hiking through herds of bison, felt like the American Serengeti. We saw a grizzly bear off to the left. We saw a black bear across this river. Yeah, the trail kind of comes down. It's like 7 miles total. And we come down to this river, and we're just sitting on the riverbed, just looking out. We got lucky. It had snowed in the morning, and then the sun came out, and it was just beautiful and quiet. And it was a real, for me, just surreal experience because I'd been wanting to go to Yellowstone for so long. It was unlike other hikes, specifically because of that wildlife. Even just going through the I think it's the Theodore Roosevelt Archway into the park was a cool, just like, you just felt like, hey, I'm out in the West now. And then to go up to Glacier, which is just epic as well. And again, we got so lucky with the wildlife. We came right up on bighorn rams, like real close. We had a run-in with a grizzly that followed us for like a mile and a half. And it was, I cannot wait. I mean, we literally have been talking about, we're trying to maybe pop back up to Yellowstone because we didn't see the wolves, and we really want to see the wolves. That's the one thing we didn't see. But I'll go back to both those parks in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I mean, that pretty much summed it up. It was a trip of a lifetime. Like Hayden was saying, I mean, the Lamar Valley in particular lives up to the name of the Serengeti of North America. I haven't seen that much wildlife and megafauna in one landscape since I've been in East Africa. I mean, it's just stunning. Like you said, when you go out onto the trails in the valley, you're just surrounded everywhere you look by bison, pronghorn, elk. It's so surreal. I can't think of another trip in the States that tops that one for me. We got really lucky and fortunate with all of the conditions. And when we were in the valley, I don't think we came across another hiker. I mean, it was just us and our friends that were out there.
Now, the moose that's on your feed, was that part of that trip, or was that from a separate trip?
It was, yeah. So previously we stopped and did a couple days in Grand Tetons, and so we saw multiple moose. Is it moose?
I think it was moose.
We saw multiple moose, I guess, or meese, whatever, in Grand Teton. It was wild because we were coming down Cascade Canyon Trail, and this snowstorm was just coming in on us. And we just kind of stopped. And I looked to the left. I'm like, oh, there's a huge moose right there. And the moose was just chilling, kind of slowly walking, eating, and like didn't even hear it. Would have never even known it was there, except like we stopped to like kind of pull a hood up and like, oh, it's a big moose.
Oh, big. You've had some amazing trips throughout the West. Have you guys been able to make it up to any of the parks up here in Washington, Oregon, or Idaho?
I haven't hit any of the major parks, none of the national parks in the Pacific Northwest. I spent a summer a couple of years ago working in Seattle, and I took every opportunity I could while I was in the city to go out and hike the local state and regional parks, Discovery Park, Ravenna, Cougar Mountain Wilderness. I was pleasantly surprised at how incredible the local parks were, even just in and around Seattle. But yeah, we got some big aspirations this year to hopefully get up to the national parks in the Pacific Northwest, especially in Washington. Rainier is at the top of the list for both of us, I think.
It's really funny too that because literally this morning, that's all I was doing was I had planned out the whole thing. We're coming up I'm gonna do like a 12-day trip in the end of July. Plan is to come up, stop in Redwoods, go hit Crater Lake, and then come up to Rainier, and then Olympic, and then the long drive back. Very, very excited. Very excited. And we'll have to talk to you also later to get some recommendations up there, because that's what I've been spending all morning researching, different hikes and what trails. And I mean, Olympic is huge.
And you could spend just a week there and not see everything.
Yeah, I'm very excited. It's funny because we really started. It's just the two of us going on these trips, and then our one buddy Lance started coming with us, and then we had a group of friends here in LA that they got intrigued, and then they started coming too, and then they got hooked on hiking, and so I was sending out messages to some of our friends, just being like, hey, this is what I'm planning. Like, I'm going to go alone, or me and my brother are going to go. And like, if you want to come, and immediately everyone's like, yep, we're in. I'm like, oh, all right, sweet.
Is that the mode of transportation that you guys like to do for a lot of your trips is do the road trips to the destination?
Yeah, that's typically what we do. In certain situations, we'll fly. And like I was talking to you about earlier, I moved up out of LA to Monterey. And so for a couple of the trips, I've flown into locations and met up with Hayden and some of our buddies there. But I think all of us enjoy the road trip. To me, it's part of the experience. Everybody piling into one or two vehicles and sharing those moments on the road, the anticipation, the excitement, the gas station coffee, everything that goes along with it.
Gas station coffee hits a little different when you're on a road trip. One thing that I like to ask guests here on the podcast is a lot of hikers have either a summit ritual or an end of the hike routine. Maybe it's a favorite snack or meal, possibly some trail brews, or maybe even just a moment of zen at the top. Do each of you have a regular custom that you do when you reach your destination, or maybe when you make it back out?
Yeah. You mentioned it, trail brews. I think I don't want to speak for both of us, but that's probably both of our answers. If possible, like to have a cold beer at the top, but either way, warm beer, cold beer, it doesn't matter to me. It's just as refreshing. I personally also like to try and, especially if it's crowded near the summit, or even if it's not, I just like to step aside myself and just kind of have a quiet mindfulness experience in the moment, take it in, put the camera down, forget about taking pictures, and just imbibe the whole surroundings of the environment. I like to listen to classical music sometimes when I do that too. Now, I refrain from doing that if it's kind of in a treacherous area, or if I need to be mindful of predators in the area. But if I can get away with it, I'll throw in the AirPods and listen to a couple classical tracks.
Yeah, definitely. I have a couple. Definitely, I used to do the beer at the top, but then, sometimes I feel a little dehydrated and going down. And I was like, you know what? I'll just hold off till I get to the end. So I like to as well, when I get to the top, definitely I like to walk away from whoever's up there, whoever I'm with, and just kind of take in that view and, just spend some time there, just kind of like clear out the head and just breathing it all in. And then definitely bottom of the hike, a cold beer and, either a burger or a pizza. And like I said, Zion, the elk burger, it's the best. But my favorite thing, every single park, I collect these Pottery National Park mugs. So I'm running out of room in my apartment. I have a massive coffee collection, but I love coffee, and so I collect the mugs at every park. And if it's a state, some state parks have them too, so I'll get them at the state parks as well.
What's the tally up to now, Hayden, on the number of mugs that you got?
I'll have to count them out, but it's got to be at least between 30 and like 40 mugs, because I'll go back to a park and be like, oh, they got a new mug. I got to get the new mug, Yeah.
So we got to get you a display case.
I know. I actually do want to get a display case for them. That'd be cool.
For you, Harrison, is there a particular beer that you like at the top, or do you try to go with something that's local and craft in the area?
Yeah, usually the latter, something local. I'm a big fan of IPAs, but I also don't shy away from Coors Light. So
liquid gold up in those mountains.
That's it.
Now, when it comes to your guys' pack list, what would each of you consider to be the most valuable piece of hiking gear that you carry on your hikes?
Well, I mean, I said it before, the Hoka Speed Goats, that's the first thing that comes to mind. And obviously that's outside of the pack, but to me, that's the most important thing is I'm sure you can find someone out there that doesn't like the Hoka brand. But regardless, whatever your preference is, having the right footwear to me is what can make or break even just a simple day hike.
It's so funny because I literally wrote down here, I was like, I bet he's going to say the Speed Goat, because that is also what I would say. And the funny thing is I can take credit. I called him up and I was like, hey, you need to get this shoe. This is the best shoe I've ever put on my foot. And that was right before Whitney. But yeah, I look, I'm on the same page, man. That I am in love with the Hoka Speed Goat. I just thought for years, honestly, I used to hike in Solomon's and they're great shoes, but for years I just thought like, oh, if I do a 10 to 20 mile hike anywhere in that range, like my feet are just going to hurt at the end of the day and I just have to live with it. Like that's just what I thought happened, like when you do those kind of hikes. And then when I switched over to the Hokas, like, oh my goodness, like my feet never hurt after a hike. I couldn't talk enough positive stuff about them. I'm excited to try the boot because I just got the boot version as well. For me, it's the Hoka, and then it's got to be, which I would imagine maybe Harrison, this would be your second as well, because we both have them, the Patagonia Nano Puffs, just because they're so thin and yet they're so warm, but they can easily roll up in the pack. I probably always have that with me unless it's like really hot out. But yeah, I would say those two. Oh, I was just saying, and if you're in Glacier, then I take it all back. It's bear spray. Because I'm not hiking in Glacier without bear spray.
Now, on the flip side, guys, has there been a piece of gear that each of you have bought that kind of didn't live up to its expectations?
Yeah. What comes to mind for me, I tried a couple of years ago, I tried converting my day pack to a military style Molly pack. I'm sure most people are familiar with them. They're backpacks that are tactical and modular, and you can sort of swap out different types of attachments to them. And I'm sure they're probably very useful for military personnel. And I've seen a lot of people use them for hiking. So I thought I'd give it a try, and it just wasn't for me. I mean, I tried two different brands that were highly recommended. They just the packs themselves felt too stiff and cumbersome. I pretty quickly just went back to using more lightweight packs and gear.
Yeah, I run a lot. I run pretty much every day, and I used to run before Hoka. I used to run because I've converted all my stuff to Hoka now, my runners too. But I used to run in Brooks, and I really like Brooks running shoes. I used to run the Glacier in. So I was like, oh, let me try their, I think it was called the Cascada hiking shoe. And so I tried that, and it just didn't, I immediately went back to my Solomon's at the time. And so, yeah, I wasn't crazy about the Brooks hiking shoe. Then I found Hoka. So you think we work for Hoka or something, but we don't. So maybe Hoka, if you're out there, hit us up.
Yeah, give them a sponsorship, because you guys have really got me interested in checking them out now, because I'm in need of a new hiking shoe this season. So I'll definitely be checking those out. Throughout this conversation, you guys have mentioned some close calls that you've had on the trails. Is there one particular instance that kind of sticks out, whether it's being followed by the grizzly or a different type of wildlife? Maybe Mother Nature caught you by surprise, or kind of got your heart pumping a little bit more than normal?
I got to go right off with this within Glacier. Yeah, we're doing this hike, and it was raining on us. And the day before, we were spoiled with the amount of wildlife we saw. And I was in the front, and I was kind of complaining to him, being like, it's raining. Like, when are we going to see something? And I was like, you know what? I just need to stop complaining and just, it's going to happen. And we literally come around this corner, and I look up, and there's this grizzly bear right there. I'm like, holy cow, it's a grizzly. It's a grizzly. And so like, I got my Canon camera. I'm like trying to take pictures, and then, it starts coming closer. And I'm like still taking pictures. I'm like, it finally hits me. Holy cow. Like, put the camera away. This thing is like not stopping. It's coming right up to us. And, we had our bear spray. Obviously, we don't want to have to use it. And my one buddy, Paul, had a bear horn. And so, like, it got probably like almost 25 to 30 feet away from us. And finally, the bear horn got it to stop. And we were definitely, hairs on the arms are up, heart is racing. And, it was not a full grown like mama grizzly bear. If it was that, I think we would have, been extremely terrified. But yeah, so then we like slowly started backing up, and but it kept following us on the trail. And it finally like kind of went off the trail, and we were going to finish the hike, but we had passed this group, this family who really didn't look like they knew what they were doing out there. And we're like, no, we got to go back and tell them there's a grizzly on the trail. So we turned around, and by the time we ran into them, the grizzly had actually come around and was back up, like following us. And like, they were, they had their phones, and I'm like, don't get so close. Like, come back. And then it followed us all. We kind of all backed out for about a mile and a half, I would say. It follows on the trail. So then we realized, we finally stopped, and the guy has all this food in his bag, and not in a bear container or anything, and he's pulling it out. And we're like, oh my God, that's why the bear's been following us. You have all this food, and it's not in a bear container. So that was, I think for me, that was the that was the most like heart racing. I will say though, if the grizzly we saw in Yellowstone, if that one had come down to us, that one looked like a full grown, but it was further away. So like this one, it was much closer. But yeah, that's my story.
For me, what comes to mind, living in Tanzania in general, I had a lot of close encounters with wildlife. Luckily, never got seriously injured. But there was one instance. This happened just outside my village. I went for a short hike behind my house, and it leads to this really beautiful overlook. It's called Kwanamzange, which in the local language means area of courtship. And there's just incredible vistas. I mean, you can see the Maasai Steppe, you can see Mount Kilimanjaro on a clear day, and then tucked away behind you are the Eastern Arc Mountains and these forests that I lived on the outskirts of. So I went up there quite often. And like I mentioned, what I like to do is just sit down, find a good solid rock to post up on, throw in my headphones and listen to some classical music. Well, I was doing that one time, and I'd been completely still for probably a good 15, 20 minutes. And I'm just staring out over the landscape, and I see this huge bird. I don't know if it was an eagle or a hawk or whatever, but a large bird in the distance. It's kind of flying across the foreground. And so my eyes are tracing it across the landscape. And then as I'm continuing to turn my head to the right, I see something bombing towards me on the ground. And it happened to be a black mamba snake. And I don't think it realized I was there. It was just pure coincidence. It was coming in my direction, didn't know I was there because I was completely still. But I saw it, and I immediately jumped up on top of the rock, and the snake paused, knew I was there. And in my mind, I was thinking, oh my God, I'm about to get bit by a black mamba. And this is where I die. I'll just have to sit down here and enjoy this. I took one more step backwards, and the snake actually got spooked itself, turned, and launched its body off the cliff down into the brush below, which I later found out was, I didn't know that was a common thing that mambas will do as a defense mechanism. There was nobody else around at that moment. I'm sure I looked like I had just seen a ghost, and I immediately went back to my house. It was another 2 weeks before I mustered up the courage to walk back to that same spot.
Oh my goodness. And Harrison, how far do you think it launched itself in order to clear the ledge?
I'm not sure. I definitely didn't walk up to the ledge to look down after it. Knowing just how steep that ledge is, I mean, I can only imagine it went pretty far.
Wow, that's wild. Both really intense experiences that you guys had. For folks that are interested in starting to hike and getting started in hiking and backpacking, what piece of advice or maybe a tip would you give those people so they have a safe and rewarding experience on the trails?
I'd say the first thing that comes to mind is always pack more water than you think is going to be necessary. And in addition to that, if you're just starting out, you're just breaking into the hiking scene, it's always fun and it's always great to challenge yourself, but definitely know your limits ahead of time and sort of build up towards certain goals, whether that's distance, number of parks you're visiting, these kinds of things. Just know your limits and don't try and push too hard.
And how about you, Hayden? What tips or advice would you have for first-time hikers?
It's funny because clearly we're brothers, because the first thing I had was bring more water than you think you need. So that was my number one thing. Yeah, I would also say, one of the things that I personally have found super beneficial, I always download the map of the trail I'm doing on AllTrails. I find that super helpful. You really don't have to worry about going off a trail that way. So I like that. And then always bring a flashlight. I always have a flashlight. We did Telescope Peak one time in Death Valley, and I didn't account for the time change and that the sun. And then so we spent walking back with our flashlights on our cell phones in the dark. I think Harrison had a headlamp, so he was prepared. I wasn't. I could have kicked myself. So I always get more water than you think you need, a flashlight, and I like to download the maps on AllTrails. Those would be my main three things. Yeah.
Nice. Solid tips, guys. Solid tips. Now, throughout this conversation, you guys have kind of alluded to what's coming up this year and beyond. I guess for each of you, what hiking goals do you have individually for this year, and then what's a hiking goal that you guys are going to be doing together?
Yeah, so I think the big one we're hoping to do together is we're going to that big trip that we were talking about earlier, up to the Pacific Northwest, hitting Mount Rainier National Park and Olympic. That one I'm so excited for, and I think we're both going to be jumping in on that. And then also in May, we're going to both be going back to Utah to do a couple parks there. Zion, Capitol Reef, and probably stopping at Bryce for a day. So we'll definitely get those in. And then I'm hoping I can get him to Yosemite because I'm going back in May to Yosemite. I want to do specifically Clouds Rest, that trail. I didn't get to do it last time I was there. I've heard it's incredible, and you overlook down on Half Dome, and it's supposed to be quite a challenging trail. So I'd love to do that, and then definitely we want to do Kilimanjaro in the future, and Alaska. We want to get up to Alaska really bad. Banff National Park has been on my list for a while. I really want to get up to Banff, but for this year, it's probably going to be that big trip up to Rainier and Olympic, and then we'll hit some other. Maybe we can get to Yellowstone again, because both want to get back to Yellowstone.
I was just looking at flights from Monterey to Bozeman to try to get out to Yellowstone in like 2 weeks. I'm like, my schedule with work is pretty lax right now. I could swing it. Prices are pretty cheap. So they're still entertaining that possibility. But yeah, aside from that, really looking forward to getting up to the Pacific Northwest. And I'm hoping to get back to Tanzania by the end of 2023, see some of my friends, spend some time in my village and the local towns that I used to hang around. And I would love to do a backpacking trip through the Eastern Arc Mountains, which is it's the mountain range that I lived in while I was in Tanzania. They kind of, as the name suggests, arc along the East Coast up towards the base of Mount Kilimanjaro. So in an ideal world, it would be a great trip to backpack through the forests of the Eastern Arc Mountains, have a few days rest, and then go summit Kilimanjaro. But we'll see. We'll see if we can do that.
No, those are all awesome trips, guys. And I know from your feed, you guys are going to take some really great pictures, and look forward to seeing the pictures from the Pacific Northwest, from all over. One thing that I've been meaning to ask you guys is, were you able to visit Yellowstone before the flooding, or was that shortly after?
We got really lucky. We went right before the massive floods occurred. It was Hayden? It was like a couple weeks.
Yeah, it was crazy because we kind of joke around about one of our friends, I think he calls it like little blessings. You have like little random things in life that you get like lucky with. And we always joke like we somehow seem to get our little blessings are like we get lucky with like the hike stuff that we do, like just whether it's a campsite being available or the weather or seeing an animal or whatever. And Yellowstone, it was crazy because it was like I think it was a week and a half after we got back like from the trip that all that happened. And we're like, oh my gosh, we were almost there for it. But we just missed it. So
guys, that's the end of the regular questions. This next bit is the this or that questions, kind of like a speed round, all hiking related. We'll do it individually. Hayden will go with you first. I'll just give you 2 options and then you just choose the one that gravitates more to you. All right?
Sounds good.
So first one is ascending or descending.
Ascending.
Waterfalls or summits.
Summits.
Switchbacks or straight up.
Switchbacks.
Trek poles or freehand.
Freehand.
Do you fuel up before a hike or do you fill up after?
I fill up after.
And how about bushwhack or go around?
Go around.
Do you jump in or do you stay dry?
I'll jump in.
And how about sunsets or sunrises?
Sunsets.
And spring flowers or fall colors?
Spring flowers.
And do you tag a hike or do you not tag a hike?
I do tag a hike. And now that I know what that meant, especially here's my quick reasons, because there's so many times I'll see on Instagram someone posts this awesome picture. I'm like, where? I want to go to this place. Like, where is it? And you don't know because they don't tag it. So I want to know because I want to go.
This is going to be fun because having 2 people, it'll be great to see if there's any differences between your responses. So Harrison, you're up next. All set? First one is ascending or descending?
Ascending.
Waterfalls or summits?
That one's tough for me, but I'm going to have to go with summits too.
Switchbacks or straight up?
Taking straight up.
Trek poles or freehand?
Freehand.
Do you fuel up before a hike or do you fill up after?
Fill up after.
And how about bushwhack or go around?
I like to bushwhack so long as it's not terribly damaging to the local environment.
And how about jump in or stay dry?
Jump in for sure.
Sunsets or sunrises?
Sunsets, bar none.
And spring flowers or fall colors?
Fall colors.
And do you tag a hike or do you not tag a hike?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with Hayden on this one. Tag because that's do unto others as you would have to do unto you.
Well, awesome, guys. That's it for the questions. Really appreciate you guys joining me today on this episode of the podcast. Now, for our listeners that want to follow you on Instagram and on social media, where can they find you?
Yeah, they can find us at Backpacking Brothers, and we're on Instagram there. We're in the process of getting a YouTube page up and going. It's also going to be at Backpacking Brothers, but that's not up and running yet, but it will be soon. But thank you so much for having us on. This is a lot of fun, and thanks you for doing this because, like I said earlier, like I love podcasts, and I have not come across other like hiking podcasts. I literally was on today looking for like Audible books like about hiking and stuff, and I couldn't even find much. So appreciate you putting this together.
Yeah, thank you so much.
No, appreciate you guys. This was really fun, and hearing all your adventures and what's to come definitely was an awesome experience, and look forward to seeing what 2023 brings for you guys. Thank you once again to Hayden and Harrison for joining us on this episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. Be sure to follow them on Instagram at Backpacking Brothers to keep up with their latest adventures. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. We'll be putting out new episodes every week through the fall and winter. Be sure to like and subscribe to not miss out on those. Also, be sure to follow us on Instagram at Hikes and Mikes. Catch you on the next one. This episode's music was created by Ketsa. Follow him on Instagram at Ketsa Music. This episode is brought to you by Flip Socks. Whether you're on the trail, on the job, or in the yard, Flip Socks will keep Mother Nature out of your boots with their innovative nylon sleeve. You no longer need to worry about any annoying debris getting trapped in your boots during your hikes. Simply flip down the nylon sleeve over any boot to prevent Mother Nature from finding its way inside, keeping your feet comfortable all day long. To get your first pair, visit flipsockswithaz.com and enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for listeners who use the promo code at checkout, I'll be donating 100% of the Season 2 promo code proceeds to Big City Mountaineers, who provide transformative experiences through connections to nature that strengthen life skills and build community for youth and disinvested communities across the nation. So if you're tired of bits and pieces of the trail finding its way into your hiking boots, pick up a pair of Flip Socks today with the promo code HikesMikes10 to get 10% off. For website and promo code, see the episode description.